Very well. Welcome back and good afternoon. I hope you're doing great. Welcome. So let's take a nice journey to our Italian vineyards. I'd like to welcome you all here and all those who are far away. You taste the same wines as we do. It's going to be a remote tasting, but we will taste the same wines. Let's start from the first territory. We go into a territory which is a giant in Italian winemaking. I'm talking about the area of Prosecco. This is an area that is right next, very close to Venezia, Venice. So it's a Prosecco that is very closely related to the history of Venice. This is a hilly area. Hills are pretty mild and not very high. And the Venetian lagoon and the sea are key elements for viticulture. And here the soils are essentially clay and alluvial soils because we are in the lowest part of the hills. And the winery we're going to visit today is called the Stafilo. This is an ancient winery that has always been very representative of this territory, as you can tell from the pictures, and that they have always followed the traditional production methods, but they have always been able to renovate themselves and innovate and find new insights and new production techniques. The style is very much based on attention and respect for the territory. They are in organic transition, so they try to work with organic farming and very clean techniques both at the winery and in the vineyards. Glera is the main variety. Until 2009, it wasn't called Glera. It was called just Uva Prosecco, Prosecco grapes, just like the wine. But then in 2009, the area of Conegliano Valdobbiadene became a DOCG and so climbed the quality pyramid and got to the top. But there is a problem, but that the law says that if you make Chardonnay across the world anywhere, you can call your wine Chardonnay, provided it's made with Chardonnay grapes, of course. So if you use the Prosecco grapes, so the old name of this grapes, you can grow it anywhere and then you can call your wine a Prosecco wine. But at a certain point, Prosecco producers decided to protect a territorial brand, a local brand, a national brand, and try to understand how to make sure that Prosecco is identified with the territory of Veneto and Friuli. Why Friuli? I will tell you in a moment. So they thought to change the name of the variety, and so they decided to use the very, very old name of the grapes, which was Glera. So from Prosecco, the name of the variety became Glera. So wherever you grow Glera grapes anywhere, you can make a Glera wine. But why can they call it the Prosecco? Because you need a motivation, a reason for calling your name Prosecco or keeping the Prosecco name. And so they used a sort of trick because the Prosecco is a very small village at the border between between Italy and Slovenia, a very small variety, village, that is called the Prosecco. So they extended the denomination to include this village called the Prosecco, and so they can call the wine Prosecco wine, even though they make it with Glera grapes. And this has been a strategy to connect the Prosecco brand to the local territory, because we started to see Prosecco being made across the world, all over the world, and there was a disconnection with the territory of origin. Glera grapes are perfect to make sparkling wines. It's a semi-aromatic grape variety that is pretty aromatic, but also with a lot of acidity. And this is a guarantee when you want to make sparkling wine. To make good sparkling wine, you need a good acidic base, and this is what Prosecco can offer. When we talk about Prosecco, we talk about a wine that has changed a lot over the years. And recently, a new style was added in the Prosecco family. That is to say, rosé, the rosé version, so the Prosecco rosé. So 90% is made with the Glera grapes, but there is a small 10% of Pinot Noir that little by little is spreading in the Prosecco vineyards that is tinting with these delicate pink hourglasses. The method is the Charmat method, which is the most representative method when we talk about Prosecco, and also it's the method that best enhances Glera characteristics. This is perfect. So Charmat method is perfect to enhance the distinctive semi-aromatic features of these grapes. So how do we pair this Prosecco wine? Actually, you buy Prosecco now and you have to drink it immediately. It's the wine of parties, of beginning of our dinners and evenings. And so needless to look for very structured dishes because this is a very immediate wine. However, this little amount of Pinot Noir that makes it a bit stronger allows us to pair it, for instance, with sushi and sashimi, raw fish, for instance, especially salmon for its fatty part, because the bubbles clean the palate, and also the seafood, simple seafood, not lobsters maybe, but just maybe shrimps. So we can experiment with this wine. And the color is definitely almost onion skin pink. The Pinot Noir is like a paintbrush, it's just coloring the glass with this mild pink note. On the nose, despite Prosecco is in terms of terpenes and in terms of olfactory explosion is giving a loss, but the Pinot Noir is pretty strong. So this small amount, despite it's only 10%, you can definitely perceive it. So the small red berries is the first input that we get from this wine, like wild strawberries, raspberry, pomegranate, the pomegranate grains. And then this goes with the liveliness of Glera. So we have the very interesting floral notes that moves from milder flowers like wisteria to greener flowers like geranium that is not a sweet flower. And also we have some aromatic herbs that are reminiscent of basil and thyme. The nose is simple but deep at the same time. And you can tell the bubbles are very fine, and we can see that. So now we take a sip and we can see how the bubbles behave on the palate. So the sip is thirst quenching. So the first sensation is these little red berries, little red fruits. So the Pinot Noir opens the door, but then come the sensations of Glera, sensation of apple. It's like eating an apple. And then aromatic herbs. So the bubbles are very pleasant on the palate. And also it's persistent and becomes more and more ample. And this is a very interesting version of what Pinot Noir can add, and how this variety can enter the world of Glera. So they find a nice, pleasant balance and immediacy, but still we have a very interesting depth. Persistence is very interesting in this wine. So this addition of Pinot Noir works very well and gives us a very gastronomic wine that pairs beautifully with food. So we can drink it on many occasions, for instance, raw fish, but also I think also a nice slice of pizza with mortadella, so with this cold cuts, so with cured meat, and we can accompany this with the pizza and the mortadella. So the first territory gives us great pleasant sensations then to continue with the next wines. Now we go down to southern Italy, to central Italy, Latium, southern Latium, in a tiny little village called Cori. Cori is on the hills, on the top of the hills, but it has a sort of natural terrace on the sea, overlooking the sea. So it benefits from the altitude of the hills and the fresh sea winds. And we have Molino 700. I think there should be someone from Molino 700. Luckily today we have quite a few winemakers who are here to tell us more about their wineries and wines. So good evening. So we present our wine this afternoon, which is called the Sette. It's made with the Bellone base, that is the typical variety from our territory, and we have added Pinot Gris to try and solve the problem of the alcohol of these grapes, the alcohol content of these grapes, because these grapes naturally have this very present sugar. And so it's hard to have wines that are not licorice wines. And so we decided not to use it pure, so 100%. You can pair it very well with fish, with white meat, and the typical dishes from southern Lazio, so seafood and fish in general. So we talk about Bellone. Bellone is the grapes of Lazio. And by the way, it was almost completely abandoned, but quite a few producers recently have recovered this pearl. And it was discovered that it's very suitable to make sparkling wines. Some Metodo Classico bottles are being made very successfully. And we taste Sette, which is 70% Bellone with 30% Pinot Gris. Pinot Grigio, and it's just vinified in stainless steel and also aging. This is a strategy to protect the most expressive sensations, distinctive features of this wine. Bellone doesn't need wood, wants an inert container, and the yellow color is straw yellow, very pale, very clear. And so you can perceive we are not on the sea, but we can perceive that the sea is very close. We have iodine, we have this iodine opening, and then it softens and turns into very fruity. White peach, the peach, a very ripened white peach, plum, or summery fruits, with some spicy notes, which are another characteristic of some types of Bellone. This white pepper note and ginger. And, let's take a sip and see how the explosiveness or the explosivity of Bellone was tamed by Pinot Gris. So very soft sip. The first impact is with glycerin. So the first part is mouth-filling, very mouth-filling. But then we have the other element that comes in, that is to say sapidity. So we have a very soft and mouth-filling attack that is followed by a pleasant sapid finish. So glycerin doesn't exasperate the palate and actually makes us want to drink more. And then we have a pinch of acidity that comes from both Bellone and Pinot Grigio, that has a very citric and clean acidity that balances the wine. As to persistence is another characteristic of Bellone, a slightly almondy finish, this sense of fresh almond on the palate, and these mouth-filling fruity notes that close the finish. This isn't a wine that is good with all fish. Actually, sometimes you could say it's too full-bodied for simple fish. Perhaps we can have roasted fish with it, but also white meat, like chicken, or grain or cereal soup. And it cleans the palate beautifully with this alcoholic strength. Bellone can be used to make spumante, sparkling wines, very structured wines, very mild and easy drinking white wines, and it's very ductile, very versatile, and I think it still has to express its real potential. We will see what happens in the next few years. Now, let's go to another land. Let's go to learn more about a very special winery. We are in Marche. We are outside the typical winemaking areas of Marche. We are in a very special territory. Here you have to imagine to climb the mountains. You have to climb the mountains to get to these vineyards. You are very close to Visso, very close village, and you have to go through canyons to get to Visso. It's a very winding road, very narrow road in the midst of these canyons in the forest to get to this place which is in the midst of the forest. And Ginevra and his family have developed a project which we can call a project of heroic viticulture. And I invite Ginevra to join me. So good evening, everyone. So as we were saying, we have a small winery. We have 3 hectares in Monti Sibillini, in a part of Visso called the Cupi, which is 20 minutes away from Visso. And in this village, there are 7 people living there. I am the 7th, so we're just 7. And after the pandemic, we are actually only 7. In any case, people come there in summertime. There are holiday houses, etc. And so we are in the national park. We have Vissanello, which is an indigenous variety, plus 2 international varieties. And we discovered this Vissanello close to the village because we were deciding where to start the vineyard, because we started from scratch. And we found some vineyards, Franc de Pierre, and this is it's an archaic Pecorino. But today we are here to present a new wine, which is the first time we bottle, which is still Chardonnay, white Chardonnay, and our choice to use these international varieties because we are very fond of Metodo Classico, and we wanted to make also still wines with these varieties because we think our terroir lends itself very well to do that. And our Chardonnay is Alcinesco. Alcinesco is a word, an archaic word in Italian, which means something charming and mysterious. Because so we took the story of the Sibylla who lived in a cave with fairies, and they were dancing with the shepherds during the night. This is a wine that expresses the distinctive features of our territory: acidity, minerality, and longevity. And also, this is a wine that is very salty because it reflects the history of the Sibillini Mountains, the Monte Sibillini, because they were underwater. And we keep finding shells and fossils. And you can definitely find this in the glass, especially with this wine. I hope you like it. Thank you. Very well. I'm very curious to taste this wine. We know Chardonnay is defined as ubiquitous, with Irene and Trebbiano is the three most grown varieties across the world. But it changes its face depending on the area. And Chardonnay in cold areas shows a very charming face, an angular face. So this territory can be used to make cutting versions of Chardonnay, less mouth-filling, as like in warmer areas. The color is straw yellow with some golden highlights that gets warmer and warmer. On the nose, I would say that this Chardonnay is very eclectic. Initially you have citrus fruits, and this is very typical of Chardonnay. So lime peel or lemon leaves. So this kind of greenish note of citrus fruits. And then comes this glimpse of minerality in which the salinity appears to be very different from the previous one. We had iodine in the previous nose. Here we have a more salty nose, a sensation that is completely different from the salinity of the first wine. And this tells us a lot about these different territories. And then we have sensations of aromatic herbs, rosemary, there is a hint of thyme as well. And there is a component, a floral component, but these flowers are very delicate and mild, like with the millefiori honey, so with the hazelnut, whiff of butter. It's a very complex note, yet very moderate and austere. And an austerity that deserves attention, that asks us to pay attention and time and to have a long chat with this kind of glass. You can tell that there is a good match, good consistency between the nose and the palate. So acidity is sharp. We have these citrusy notes that become protagonists, and salivation starts with acidity, and it seems it's over. We stop salivating, but then we start again with the sapidity. So it's a sort of ping-pong game between more acidic notes and more sapid notes. And then Chardonnay brings out its structure. And here we have a softness that comes from alcohol that is present but not overpowering. And on the other, very fine glycerin that looks like a sort of arch that is placed on these two pillars, acidity and sapidity, that support it. Then in the finish we have aromatic herbs, dried fruit, hazelnuts, this buttery ending that makes it very austere yet gentle. This can play a great role. Certainly, it's great with fish, maybe fatty fish, but I think it can be paired very well with roast beef or chicken or vitello tonnato, so white meat with a tuna fish sauce, and also a nice bruschetta with lard that is melting down. So this acidity and sapidity balance the softest components of this dish. So it's flowing very well. Thank you, Ginevra. Let's now go south, and here we go to Serracavallo. Here we are in Calabria. This is the land that the Greek called Enotria. So the first coasts where they arrived were called the land of wine because they went there and they found already lots of vineyards. Then they rationalized them with more advanced know-how. But viticulture, winemaking was a very spontaneous activity here. Here we're in the northern part of Calabria. When we think of Calabria, we think of beaches and hot weather, but this territory is different. We are more inland, fresher, with very significant temperature differences and fairly interesting altitudes. And so the profile of the wines is different from the wines from the coast. Also for Serracavallo, we have someone here from Serracavallo, am I right? From this cold and fascinating land. I am Fabiana Filotti from Serracavallo. As she said, we are in the province of Cosenza. Our winery is at 600 meters above sea level. We are at the foot of Sila. This section was part of the volcano, so it's a granitic soil. This wine is called Quattro Lustri, and it marks an important turning point in our winery because we used the Maiocco Dolce, that was the basic variety in all red wines, but we hadn't managed yet to make a red wine only with the Maiocco Dolce that could be drank easily and immediately without aging them in barrique and without blends with international varieties such as Cabernet. We managed to do so after lots of tests and experiments. We worked 4 clones of Maiocco Dolce in different ways since we harvest them. So each one follows a different route, and this is the result of it. This is called the Quattro Lustri because we started in 2015 to make it to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the winery. Very well. So Maiocco Dolce is a very interesting biotype that shouldn't be confused with Gallioppo. It's very similar, but the varieties are very different. Generally come from the same area, but they have different personalities. Here we have a wine that is fermented in stainless steel and aged in bottle, essentially. And if you check the color, you definitely find a purplish color, fuchsia purple. And here we have the polyphenolic component, the anthocyanins of this variety, and pigments, and how colorful and coloring it can be, despite the maceration isn't very long. It's a very clean color, and let's see the nose. The nose is very dark, so like licorice root. I would say that at the beginning is earthy. It talks about roots and bark and damp soil and leaves, a kind of sensation of mushroom. So I would say it's a black nose. So we have the overripe cherries and blueberries and quinine, and it makes me think of a wine that will explode on the palate with the fruity notes and its persistence. So let's taste it. And it's almost chewable. So the texture is pretty strong. The tannin is clean and not overpowering, present but well balanced from the roundness and fruitiness. Is still very somber and dark with these undergrowth sensations, and this licorice never abandons us. It's always there to create a sort of guiding thread between the nose and the mouth and the palate. This pairs beautifully, for instance, with pork fillet, so a fatty dish. And because it has a very rich taste, or maybe a soup of beans with pancetta, so with cured meat, and it's a wine that warms us up. And that you have to pair with dishes you would share with friends for dinner. And it's a wine that you can have a great chat with. And despite the texture, it's not heavy at all. And it's a nice wine that, for instance, you can drink on Sunday for a Sunday meal. Now we move away from the mountains and go closer to the sea. Now we go to an area which is in between the mountain and the sea that can benefit from both of them. Rosso Piceno in the southern part of Marche, facing the sea with Monti Sibillini behind. So it's a small area where we have a sort of natural constant air conditioning, because cold winds come down from the mountains and blend with the breezes that blow from the sea and create these air recirculation that keeps the vineyards at a perfect temperature, especially when the grapes ripen. And here we have Cantina Valdaso. I think we have someone from Cantina Valdaso. So we are talking about a cooperative winery, very interesting, different from all the others. Cantina Valdaso is one of the most historical wineries in central Italy. It was founded in 1962, and this year we will celebrate our 60th harvest. And our members, about 300, grow their grapes in Valdaso, territory that goes from Monte Sibillini to the Adriatic Sea. The vineyards are in 32 villages of Vallata del Laso, and the particular distinctive feature is that we can make 3 harvests in one harvest, because first we harvest from early ripening wines closer to the sea. Then we climb up, we go to the mid hills and then the high hills vineyards. And today we are going to taste the Sixtus, that is a wine that is intended to celebrate Pope Sixtus the Fifth, that we developed with the Marche region, because Sixtus V was born in 1521, and the fifth lived in Montalto delle Marche. And so we created this wine to celebrate this Pope. It's made of Montepulciano and Sangiovese. 60% Montepulciano and 40 Sangiovese. Thank you very much. Very well. Let's discover this blend. That is a very interesting wine. So putting together Sangiovese and Montepulciano means to put together two varieties with two very different personalities. Montepulciano is colorful, welcoming, warm, soft tannins, a wine that is cuddling us. So when you go home and you're tired, a glass of Montepulciano is like a hug, like a treat. Sangiovese behaves differently. Sangiovese is tannic and has lots of acidity. Much more rigorous variety in its evolution in the glass. You can find it often in central Italy because one can balance the characteristics of the other. Sangiovese is adding and giving tone to the Montepulciano, and the Montepulciano can dampen and soften the angular characteristics of Sangiovese, which is pretty tough, especially when young. And also the color. The color expresses a great balance because Montepulciano has a very strong color because of the anthocyanins, which are many, whereas Sangiovese has anthocyanins that finds it a bit more hard to stand out. And so the Montepulciano wines are more dense and red, whereas the others are clearer. Here we find this bright ruby, almost purple red, but the transparency is the transparency of Sangiovese. And so the blend tells that very evidently. And on the nose, we can have a perfect coexistence. Sometimes it's a fight and then a meeting, a hug between the two. First of all, we have the Montepulciano. We perceive Montepulciano. So the first breath in this glass is the Amarena Fabbri, the sour cherries in alcohol. Then we have a spicy note, which is like a bridge between these two varieties. We have sweet spices, cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, which is for Montepulciano, and then cardamom, and that is more for Sangiovese. And then we have the minerality of Sangiovese, which is slightly ferrous, hematic wine note. And here we have laurel and rosemary and a balsamic note that reminds me of menthol. And there is a twist of wood and tobacco, blondo, sweet tobacco that gets dark and becomes cocoa and coffee. So the nose has a nice dialogue between these two varieties with very different characters and instincts. So there is a compromise on the palate between the two. And here again, what is more open and expressive is Montepulciano. And it's the first input we get. So we get this chewable fruit, this sour cherry stands out. And then tannins stand out. And these tannins are strong yet soluble, so they dehydrate the tongue but then melt down. And so this citrusy acidity and this twist of sanguinella orange is the acidity of Sangiovese that strengthens the fruity component of Montepulciano. And it's interesting to hear that in the finish, the persistence is very consistent. So on the nose, the wine promised plenty of things, fruit, flowers, aromatic herbs, wood, and then there is a good consistency of this also on the palate. And so in the retro olfactory notes, we have a sequence of fruity notes at the beginning and then toasty, smoky notes. This pairs well with structured dishes such as risotto with porcini mushrooms or filled turkey or quail, maybe with chestnuts and mushrooms. So we need a rich dish to support the mass of flavors of this blend. And now let's continue. And we go in the heel, actually on the tip of the heel of Italy. We go to Salento, the southernmost tip of Italy. This is the place where the Mediterranean Sea is explosive. So we have this nice, great part between two seas with constant wind. And soils between Lecce and Otranto is special. That's a plain. Generally, the plain isn't considered particularly suitable for winemaking. Generally, we talk about hills. But we have some plains in Italy with very interesting soils. This is a clay soil, but very special because it's red with plenty of iron, very mineral. But below this topsoil of red clay, we have a strong mass and layer of limestone. These soils are very similar to Comawara, southern Australia, with the great Syrah and Cabernet. And it's no coincidence that in Salento, there are 2 or 3 enologists from Australia who came over here and found a very similar territory. And why does this plain work so well? Well, because this is a very dry area. Puglia comes from a pluvia, meaning without rain. Clay absorbs water, limestone traps it in the depth of the soil, and these plants, when it's very dry, we had a lot of drought in the last few years, but they can find this source of water in the depth of the soil. And here we have a winery called Menhir Salento. Do we have anyone from Menhir? Oh, no, so the gentleman is not from the winery, but from the area of Salento. I thought you were from the winery. In any case, we have a local. So Menhir, why Menhir? Well, this name is very indicative of this territory because Menhir are vertical rocks that are very ancient, placed by man, so like totems that populate the Salento countryside. Here we have 2 brothers, Gaetano and Vito, who started their winery in 2002. And so in the first picture, you can really see the red color of these soils. And if you visit the vineyards, you have to take clean shoes because it's as if you go to play tennis. So you have the same color as the tennis court. And the name of Menhir thinks of the historical nature of this special area. And we taste the Negramaro, very powerful grapes. Negramaro comes from Latin and Greek, and in both languages it means black, nero. It's like nero, nero, and black, because these berries are very dark purple, blue, and often it's associated with Primitivo. But these two varieties are completely different. Primitivo is much softer and hugging, whereas Negro Amaro is more tannic and with more acidity. And it's perfect to make the great rosé from Puglia. And it gives its best on in these areas. We taste Filo, that is made with 100% Negro Amaro. Fermentation lasts for 20 days on the skins, so great extraction of polyphenols of Negro Amaro. Then 1 year of barrique to dampen and to offset the tough, harsh character of this untamable variety. Then some barrique, then bottle, and then it's ready to market. Negro Amaro is a variety. How long can it last, you may ask? Well, it depends. We can have uh, wines that to drink immediately, where we don't have the maximum extraction from the skins. But like in this case, we can keep it for 6 or 8 years, and certainly wood helps. And this can be paired with powerful dishes, and so maybe lamb stew, for instance, could be an interesting pairing. But we have to taste it first. And in the glass, we have this very dark color, dark compact ruby red. The nose, this is the typical fragrance smell that you perceive in Puglia. The Mediterranean trees, juniper and myrtle become like liquid. So it's like a myrtle liquor, like a creme de cassis. And then these clay sensations and ferrous sensations that dominate the nose. And the myrtle, laurel, rosemary, thyme. So, and we even have orange peel and the marine sensations, the sea breezes, the sea rocks, and there is some floral notes. So it's like a bunch of dried flowers. So with the dark spices like black pepper that become piquant and pungent, and sensations that are related to the use of wood. So toasty, like burnt, toasted wood. So this boisé note. And so you can tell already it's a mouth-filling and deep wine. So warm for its alcohol content, and rich, full, tannic, but sapid. And despite this extract, very present extract, we have this sapidity in the finish. And acidity is another great characteristic of Negro Amaro. One of the elements that ensures also a long life and a great aging potential. As to persistence, we are truly submerged and immersed in the Mediterranean scrubs. So it's like we are chewing the juniper berries. We have laurel and the balsamic note of rosemary. This is a wine which is truly nestled like a menhir in this territory. So it's a spokesperson of this territory. And this pairs with structured dishes. There can be lamb stew or pork shank that is fatty, greasy, succulent. And here we have the elements to clean the mouth, and therefore this pairs with structured dishes. And now let's move over to Tuscany, and we go to one of the many versions of Montepulciano variety. The last two wines are two Montepulciano, and I think it's very interesting to taste these two wines from the same territory to understand the distinctive features that they have in common and the differences. The first winery is I Cipressi. And the area of Nobile di Montepulciano, the village of Montepulciano, is in the southeastern part between Val d'Orcia and Val di Chiana. If you remember the typical postcard from Tuscany with these very soft hills looking like sea waves, well, that's exactly what the landscape is like. And so it's a very bucolic scenery of Tuscany. So hills, hilly area, like many areas of Italy. We are talking about of a land that was underwater in the past. And so we have some memories of the sea. And we can find the sea in the soil. So the winery is I Cipressi, cypresses. And these are typical in Tuscany. And we have these nice avenues. They are celebrated by poet Carlucci. This is a family winery that started in the 1960s. They are from Campania, but they moved to Tuscany. So they decided to grow vineyards. And they have 6.5 hectares in the area of Montepulciano. And they choose this name because the central part of the farm is surrounded by cypresses. And so they are very typical of the farm itself. And Montepulciano means Sangiovese grapes. The most red berry grapes grown in Italy. And Sangiovese has many identity cards, many passports to enter different territories and change completely its characteristics. So it's very adaptable, and Sangiovese has a great ability not just to adapt to different territories, because it adapts so well that it can change the characteristic of its DNA depending on the soil where it is. That's why we have many different clones of Sangiovese, each and every one for each individual area. And when we talk about Sangiovese, we can say there are two families, Sangiovese Grosso, big, and Piccolo, small. The difference between these two big families of Sangiovese, the names can be misleading because the Sangiovese Grosso has the smallest berries, but the skin is very thick. So when it's crushed, we don't get much must, but we have much more skin content than fluid. So this means maximum extraction of polyphenols. Sangiovese, called Piccolo, small, has much larger berries but much thinner skin. So this means to have more must and less extraction. When we talk about Montepulciano, Montalcino, Chianti Classico, we talk about Sangiovese Grosso, the small berries that give more power and structure to these wines. And the wine we are going to taste is Sangiovese Grosso, 100%, by Cipressi. It's a Vino Nobile di Montepulciano, long maceration, 20-25 days of extraction of polyphenols, and then 24 months in big casks. And barriques are pretty widespread in Tuscany, but the traditional container of historical container of Sangiovese, certainly that's the large barrels, the large casks, and this is very typical of Sangiovese. Then, after 2 years in cask, it stays 6 months in the bottle, and then it's ready to be marketed. Sangiovese has lots of tannins and incredible acidity, and this makes it one of the most persistent variety. So if you drink it after 15 years from harvest, these wines are great. They age very well. And this pairs beautifully with a nice raw steak with very juicy that can balance off the tannins. And in the glass, you can definitely find the typical colors of Sangiovese. And before we were comparing with Sangiovese, with Montepulciano, sorry. Sangiovese has a weaker color, and actually the color is ruby, but it's almost granite, more brick, more orangey. But most of all, the wine is clear, it's transparent, it's not dense and compact. And this is a characteristic of Sangiovese. And now on the nose. Amongst the various denominations of Sangiovese, in the area of Montepulciano, a biotype of Sangiovese Grosso is used, which is called Prugnolo Gentile. Gentile, kind or gentle, defines very well the characteristics of this biotype because it has this olfactory sensation, which is very airy. So Chianti Classico has very dark notes at the beginning, whereas here we have flower notes, red roses, violet, wisteria, and then comes a spicy part with sweet spices, a whiff of cinnamon and nutmeg. And there is also a whiff of incense, and the toasty notes speak of fragrant woods like patchouli, sandalwood. So I say it's an airy, elegant, and lightweight wine. And then we go to the heart of Sangiovese, that is the forest, and that always has these olfactory notes with these balsamic sensations related to fern. And also small red berries, raspberry, red currant. So sensations of musk, not so much of bark. So it is a very ample Sangiovese, a very light-hearted Sangiovese. And let's see the palate. So it's a gentile, kind like the Prugnolo Gentile, but it remains a Sangiovese. And so we have the tannins and acidity and the red-orange bite. On the palate, we have this sense of bergamot, and this is a very young tannin. This is 2018, and so it has just started its journey, so it is still young as a Sangiovese. However, we still see that there is a great wine behind, especially in the persistence of this wine. So it's like a fan, which is closed at the beginning, but in the retro-olfactory part, it opens up with very interesting retro-olfactory notes of floral notes. That ends with the underbrush and, let's say, the wood. And this is very typical of Sangiovese. This is the real potential of Nobile di Montepulciano. So of this very elegant version of Sangiovese. Then we remain in the same territory, and this is very interesting because we can fully understand the characteristics of the same area. So we go from Cipressi, we go to the neighbors, more or less, Podere Casanova. Is there anyone from Podere Casanova? No, there's me. Very well. So a very young winery, 2016, Isidoro and Susanna chose to leave their professional careers that were completely different and decided to go back to the origin of their family, so back to the countryside, so back to this wonderful countryside. Now they have 16 hectares of vineyards facing the Val d'Orcia, one of the most beautiful landscapes in the world. And these 16 vineyards are scattered around the winery and in the woods in close by. They rebuilt the cellar, the winery, the tasting room. They've created a small holiday farm with 3 apartments. And their Nobile di Montepulciano is a somewhat different version compared to the previous one. Again, Sangiovese Grosso and then Prugnolo Gentile. Fermentation is in stainless steel, controlled temperature, 20-25 days. But here they decided to use different types of wood. So the wine is kept partly in larger barrels, 1,000 liters, and in small French barriques for 18 months. Then the wine remains in bottles for 6 months. And the longevity is typical of Sangiovese. And you can tell that for the colors we are very consistent with the previous wine. So granite, brick color, brick red. Let's take a look at the nose. And here the wood is different, and it has concentrated this nose. The fruity part comes out first, and ripen cherries and plum and red berries jam. Then we have the floral notes typical of Prugnolo Gentile. Floral notes, mainly red roses in full bloom. And here again we have these sensations of, let's say, more mild toasty notes, blonde tobacco, and so it has the sort of Moncherie effect that is like a sour cherry with chocolate, and then the coffee, the first drops of coffee coming out of the coffee machine, and then we have the woods. We don't have the musk, but the damp soil. So sensation of roots and mushrooms and dry leaves. So it's softer, but we have the nature of the territory and of the variety. So you can tell that here we have the very round and more impactful. So acidity is there, and it's typical of Sangiovese, but it's less angular, more dampened, and also tannins are sweeter. But in this case, the barrique is an accelerator of evolution. The smaller the barrels, the more impactful it will be on the wine, because the wine evolves in the barrels, and the barrique has certainly softened the wine faster. So this is somewhat more evolved. It's 2017, so one more year. So we have the same nature, but a different face of the same variety, same territory. And this tells a lot about the versatility of this territory that can express itself in the glass. So we have taken a great journey from north to then down south, then back to the central Italy, and I hope I gave you a good overview of the potential of our varieties, of our vineyards. It would take months on end to tell you about all the potential and peculiarities and typical features of Italian wine. However, I thank you very much for your attention. It was a pleasure to share the tasting with you. And so I say hello to you and goodbye to you, and also to those who follow us from faraway places. Thank you.